I'm Susan Smith, co-director of For Women Scotland, and the event today was a women's rally to mark and protest about the fact that Scottish Government are determined to pass GRA reform, which will effectively undermine the definition of sex in law in Scotland. Up until now, people suffering from gender dysphoria who have taken meaningful steps to change their bodies or change their lives have been able to get a gender recognition certificate. What is now proposed is this is opened up to anybody who wants it. And when the GRA was originally passed, it was thought that it would be maybe applicable to about 5,000 people across the whole country. We're now being told that it's going to be applicable to about 500,000 people. But who knows where that's going to stop? And what we have now are male people in women's prisons, some of whom are there accused of rape or violent crime. And there is no limit. Anybody and everybody can claim this protection under law.
My name's Joanne Lamont. The issue around self-ID, it's a comfortable place for people to go to say, well, you're anti-trans and you're consumed by hatred. I can't tell you how much that is not true. If I thought for a moment that this was a hate-filled movement, I would have no part of it. Neither would any of the women who are here, I'm sure. It's not about trans people. It's about what we have learned about the way in which predatory men operate. Men have become priests, they've become doctors, they've gone in and worked with people as football coaches, as gymnastic coaches, they have worked in care homes, and the reason they are there is they go where there's access to vulnerable women and to children.
So I'm Rona Hotchkiss, and I was a speaker today at the For Women Scotland event in front of Holyrood. We are here to express our concern and outrage at the MSPs not listening to us over the passing of the Gender Reform Act, and particularly around self-ID, which will allow any man on a whim to declare that he's a woman and access women's spaces. We're concerned about women's refuges, women's prisons, women's single-sex services in general, because we know that men will use this to abuse women. We know that women are frightened, we know that women will self-exclude where we can, and we're particularly concerned about women in prison because they can't self-exclude.
I've travelled from Glasgow to come to protest against the self-ID law that's just about to become law. They're discussing it at the end of the month, and it means that a person can just self-identify as somebody of the opposite sex without having any diagnosis of gender dysphoria, not had any hormones, no transitions. That means that a man who just decides that he maybe wants to harass women can walk into our toilets, and if we complain, we'll be in the wrong.
My name's Elaine Miller. I am a fellow of the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy specialising in women's health. I think that it's potentially harmful for trans-identified people, because if you're allowing 16-year-olds to determine that they are of the opposite sex without diagnosis from a doctor, to not do any differential diagnosis to rule out that they've got autism or they're struggling with sexuality, they've got a history of trauma. They're basically saying that children can diagnose themselves on TikTok and make life-changing decisions, and I think that's insane. It's ludicrous. It's not what a sensible society would do, let alone a parliament.
This legislation will have a huge impact on women. It's already having an impact on women. Women are being jailed alongside convicted rapists. Women are being told in hospitals that they can't ask for female care. Parents of disabled children are being told they're not entitled to have their child looked after by a female assistant. And we're being told women who are victims of male violence, who seek refuge from Women's Aid or in rape crisis, are being told they're the problem.
My name's Kirsty, I'm from Glasgow. There's this myth that we are anti-trans. We're not anti-trans. Any adult can live their life whatever way they want. What we have is self-ID, where men will pretend to be something that they're not. Contrary to what Shona Robinson, MSP, said, men will pretend to be someone that they're not to access women. It's a tale as old as time. We need to just ensure that we have that last line of defence for women's services. Self-ID is wiping that out the water.
Well, the thing is, it's not written on somebody's forehead that they're a nice man or not a nice man. If I walk in a street at night and there's a man behind me, he might be a really nice guy, but I don't know that. So I have to protect myself. I don't feel safe.
I've come up from London today, and I've come up from London because it's incredibly important that we examine this from a UK legal framework. If a GRA certificate issued in Scotland is recognised in London, that means that people can come to Scotland to essentially self-ID and then use English services. This has effects for the entirety of the United Kingdom, and it's so important that the erosion of women's rights isn't allowed within a unitary state with a recognisable legal framework that's unitary to continue, because if it erodes in one place, you are strong as your weakest link. So that's why it's so important, and that's why I've come here today, and also I've come here today to stand up for so many women who face harassment and abuse purely for stating their biological sex, the primacy of that, and their rights.
I've come through from Glasgow, and I've been following this situation with women's rights for maybe 6 years or so, and I've been astounded to see just how regressive and homophobic the so-called trans rights movement's become. And all you have to do is look at the way they treat trans people who speak out in favour of women's rights to see how intolerant and divisive it is. And I think it's really important to be here, and it's been fantastic to see the speakers and hear the speakers, and I really hope everyone listens and understands the importance of stopping self-ID coming into law.
The difficulty with the proposed self-ID legislation is that it doesn't just affect trans people. It means that anybody at all can identify as the opposite sex on a whim without any conditions being attached, and after 3 short months after applying for it. What that means is that women won't be able to challenge men who come into their spaces. They'll be afraid to challenge them, and they actually face being targeted if they do by their employers, by education, and eventually by the law. And women are very, very afraid.
We fought all our lives, my grandmothers and women have fought for decades to have women's rights, to have their own spaces. There was a time in this society when women didn't even have public toilets. Now we have our own public toilets, and now we're going to have men to go into it because they think they are women.
No matter how much I care for, and I do care for trans people, I was a school teacher. I accepted there were constraints on what I could do with young people because of what a bad person might do. That is what safeguarding is. And we have to find a way through this that understands how predatory people behave, what we have learned in our history of young people, of women who have been silenced by men who saw an opportunity. We can't open up more opportunities for them. And I know that many trans people themselves understand that. And what's been done in their name is not acceptable.
It's absolutely incredible because you feel like a lone voice because you're not anti-trans, and nobody will have that debate about self-ID because you're just shut down, called names.
I think fundamentally you have to ask this, and you have to ask this really carefully. Why does this law only affect trans people? And also, does it not fundamentally water down protections that trans organisations have been campaigning for? Let's remember, these organisations were campaigning for stronger medical care, stronger assessment from doctors, more of it, and now they're campaigning for less. I think fundamentally, when you look at this, the impacts on women have not been assessed, and if you discard the importance of sex which underpins everything, you therefore undermine the rights of gay people, the rights of women, and beyond that as well. This is something that fundamentally, when we see their arguments, trans women are women like black women are women. Well, no, that's fundamentally wrong, and it's undermining black women. It's undermining every other type of woman who has every right to be a woman.
The idea is everybody should be free to express themselves how they want and believe what they want. But self-ID is not about that. Self-ID is about them imposing their beliefs on everybody else. So it's about taking away your freedom of belief, taking away your freedom of expression to say very, very simple truths. 2 + 2 = 4. Humans can't change sex. Men aren't women. Teenage girls aren't gay men. And it's not hate to say these things. Live your life how you like. But if you make your happiness or your well-being dependent upon other people validating your self-beliefs, you're never going to be happy.
seeing all these women today from all over the country, from down south. Some MPs have popped out to say hello, which is great. But just the camaraderie amongst women from all walks of life. This isn't a political movement, this is a women's movement, and we're really unhappy and we won't waste.
It's so encouraging to see women prepared to come out for a start and that they are so well informed. So I have hope that actually there is an understanding about the level of threat that we have to everything about women in Scotland today, and I'm confident that they're not going to let this go.
It was brilliant, really good, great speakers, incredible turnout, even the weather was kind to us. It was a fabulous day and so much passion, so much determination. This government are really stupid if they think they can hurt women in the way they're planning to.
Women need single-sex spaces and the Scottish Government is ignoring that, and we're not standing for it anymore.